Bismillah. Yeah, I'm ready, Sheikh. Bismillah. Alhamdulillahi wahdahu. والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. We continue with Surah Thalatha. This time 3:07 p.m. Sunday, April 28th, 2019. which is in agreement with the Islamic calendar, which is the 22nd of Sha'ban. The 22nd of Sha'ban, the year 1440, after the hijrah, the migration of the Prophet ﷺ. We continue in Usul al-Thalatha as we arrive, it's the wrong book. As we arrive to the second principle, or the second al-Usul, or al-Asl al-Thani, the second principle. Excuse me, everyone, I've pulled my wrong book. As we were discussing Al-Asl Thani, the second principle in Usul al-Thalatha, we were discussing in which the great Imam Al-Mujaddid, Al-Mu'allif, the author, the reviver of the true understanding of Islam, not only just Islam itself, but the true Islam according with the correct understanding and the correct methodology of Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah. As we were discussing the second principle where he said, having knowledge of the religion of Islam. So you notice that he started the book and inaugurated this tremendous treatise by one attaining knowledge of Allah first, as that was the also we've been covering, or that was the first principle we were covering for the past year, having knowledge of Allah. Then he said the second principle is knowledge of the religion of Islam with evidences and proofs. And this is where we stopped last week. Having knowledge of Islam with evidences and proofs is also what's incumbent upon every Muslim wa Muslimah, every male and female Muslim, to show you clearly that our religion is not based upon emotions. It is not based upon what we think or what we may find as good within ourselves or what we perceive as good or evil, but rather is based upon evidences and proofs in which Allah Himself, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, has legislated as an affair, whether it be good or whether it be evil, or whether it be something beneficial for the creation or harmful, especially in the affairs of what will be the reason for their rectification and salvation in this world and the hereafter. Rather, like we said, it is not with our opinions or with our emotions or how we feel. Rather, it's based upon evidences and proofs clearly from Kitab and Sunnah, from the Book of Allah and the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. As we said last week, if you look in your books, it says, if everyone would look in their books, it says, what is Islam? The deen of the religion of Islam is al-istislamu lillahi bit-tawheed. One surrendering himself to Allah with unifying Him in His worship. And submitting oneself to Him by obeying Him. And one freeing himself from polytheism and its people. And we said that it is three levels: Islam and Iman and Ihsan. As he said, Islam, that is, as they say, واسع أسفله. ثم كلما يرتقي بذلك صاحبه فإن المراتب تضيق فيصبح أضيق فَيَضْيَقْ. For you find that Islam, that is wasi'u, they have the lowest, which means you have the levels. All of them are high, but we're speaking now relatively in regards to the other higher levels, such as Iman and Ihsan, even though all of them are high. So Islam, as we know, is one surrendering himself with Allah Ta'ala, and also submitting oneself to Him by obeying Him and freeing himself from polytheism and its people. That is pertaining to Islam al-Zahiri, meaning what one openly manifests with the religion. And we know that those who can also fall into this type of level is the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. As the hypocrites profess Islam openly, but however, they did not carry out Iman. But however, they manifest Islam with the open actions and what they profess with their tongues. So that's the reason why we said those who truly surrender to Allah by being Muslim or professing the religion of Al-Islam can be those who just merely, like we said, surrender themselves. But maybe perhaps that Iman did not enter their hearts yet. As we know the ayat which comes in Surah Al-Hujurat, as we discussed last week. So Islam is the most, like we said, even though all these levels are high, but Islam is for those who have surrendered themselves to Allah by unifying Him in His worship and openly obeying Him and freeing Himself from polytheism and His people. That can enter in it those who are truthful and those who are likewise hypocritical, or from the hypocrites who profess Islam openly, but they conceal disbelief secretly or within themselves, meaning what they internalize in their belief. So you have Islam, then as you go up the ladder, as we discussed last week, it becomes more constricted. It becomes constricted, and the level becomes higher as far as those who are truly sincere with Allah in their belief and what they profess as far as their Islam. Then you have those who are reached a higher level, which is the people of Iman. And they possess a khissisa, a distinguishing quality. That maybe perhaps that some of those who just openly surrender themselves, meaning they're Muslim, they do not have that quality, which is actual tasdeeq. Tasdeeq, meaning that you have that complete acknowledgement. And that faith has now been entered inside of the heart. Meaning Allah Ta'ala has now planted and put in the heart of His abd, of His servant, something He has not given maybe perhaps others, which is now on a higher level, which is called mu'min or iman, as we discussed. And the mu'mineen, even though Allah Ta'ala has described them as being from the true people of Ahl al-Millah or Ahl al-Islam, they have a distinguishing factor about them which the people of Islam have not been given, even though we know both enter inside of each other. No doubt. As we discussed this last week, if Islam and Iman is mentioned in the same context, they separate and take their own meaning. However, if one was to be mentioned in one particular context, then one goes inside the other, as we discussed. So we're not separating them as far as if one of them is to be mentioned in the context. But here, if you notice in your books, he mentioned both of them in one context. So here in this sentence, if you look in your books, they both separate and take their own meaning. And that's what we're doing here. However, if you was to look in another text in another book, as we discussed, that Islam, if it's mentioned separately and by itself in the context, then Iman falls into it. Iman falls into it, and they gather and they're coupled together. And similar to that, Islam or Iman, if it's mentioned by itself in the context, Islam falls into it. However, if you look in your books right now, what do you see? That Islam and Iman are mentioned separately, but it's in the same context. in the same context, but they're mentioned Islam and Iman. But it's mentioned in one context here in your book. It's mentioned here, and excuse me, I'm not saying one context. They mention it in the same context, separately, meaning Islam and Iman is mentioned. So being that the case, they take their own individual meaning now. Islam, like we said, is just merely one surrendering himself to Allah with monotheism, and one surrendering himself to Allah by obeying Him and freeing himself from polytheism and his people. That is Islam, in which we said those who are truthful can fall into it, or fall into this type, or fall into this category, which is considered good, no doubt. But also those who can do the same thing openly in order to fool or deceive the people are the people of nifaq, the people of hypocrisy. As them, they can surrender themselves to Allah, and they can also openly manifest obedience to Allah, and they can also openly manifest them freeing themselves or their disloyalty or their disunity from polytheism and its people, but still hide something of disbelief or something that will nullify the religion in their hearts. However, this type is negated on the second category, which is Iman. Iman, nifaq or hypocrisy, is negated. That's only for specific people who truly have now attained another level, a higher level, which is where they say Iman, and we said that Iman is a tasdeeq, is that actual acknowledgement of the heart truly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plants in the hearts of certain individuals and people, that He chooses whom He wills, and He plants the seed of Iman in their heart, meaning that firm belief and conviction that what they're upon is actually the true haqq, is that they embrace and acknowledge, and they have the conviction totally that what they're doing and what they're professing and what they're worshiping to Allah Ta'ala is the truth. That is another level in which Allah only gives to certain people, in contrast to the people of Islam, like we said, because they merely just surrendered. Then as you go up the ladder, as we discussed last week, you have the people of Ihsan. They are khullasul mu'mineen. They are the pure believers of Allah Ta'ala, have now attained another level. So as you go up the ladder, you know it becomes more and more constricted, or it becomes constricted, where now the number decreases because they are only for certain people. Those people who have reached the level of Ihsan are only a specific people in which Allah Ta'ala has given them, because of their, as they say, shiddatu muraqabatihim lillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala, قَدْ نَالُوا هَذِهِ الرُّتْبَةَ الْعَالِيَةَ. He says, because of them truly fearing Allah and watching and monitoring what they do, meaning in their belief and in their actions, and because of them having that shiddatul muraqabah of them because of them watching themselves and monitoring themselves of how they maintain their relationship and their connection with Allah, then, like we said, they reach the highest level of Iman, in which the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had described in the Hadith Jibreel. And they are al-mu'minun al-khullas. They are the pure, sincere mu'minun. And to the point, like we said, they do not want to do anything or say anything except what pleases Allah. And that level is the highest level in which the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had described, and based upon what the great Imam, Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, mentioned in this context. They are those who have reached the level in which they worship Allah Ta'ala as if they see Him, even though they do not see Him. And that is the what? The highest level of faith in which one can reach. And you notice each time one goes up the ladder, he purifies his ubudiyah, his worship of Allah Ta'ala, more and more and more. And that is in regards to the natural disposition of a human being, the level he wants to reach. He reaches a level each time he goes up the ladder here that's mentioned in the context. He draws closer to Allah because he actualizes the reason of his creation, or the reason why he was brought into this existence in the first place. Every time the human being actualizes the purpose of why he's created, then he becomes complete as far as a human being. A human being, meaning the more the one surrenders himself to Allah and submits himself to Allah, the more he reaches a higher level with Allah. However, even though he's still a human being, because we said the word ubudiyah. Ubudiyah means slavery, servitude, surrendering oneself. Because that is what every human being was created for. They were created to actualize that purpose, which is the ubudiyah, the self-servience, or the servitude and worship of Allah Ta'ala. And notice in your books, Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, all of them are connected with the ubudiyah of Allah, and they have different levels. In each level, one, then you have another level, which is another ubudiyah, another level of ubudiyah. Then you have a third level of ubudiyah, which is the ihsan, the perfection in one's worship, where he does not want to look at except what pleases Allah, where the love of Allah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, raises him to the level of where he does not want to do anything except please Allah, and what he looks at, and what he believes, and what he touches, and what he professes and does openly. All these affairs are connected ultimately with the ubudiyah of Allah based upon their different levels. And like we said, relatively speaking, all these levels are high. Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. All of them are levels which are considered high and lofty. But in relatively speaking, in regards to one and the other, one is of a higher level, and then another is of another higher level. Whereas the lowest, relatively speaking, is wasi'u asfalahu, which is Islam. That the most general of the levels, even though all of them are high, is Islam. Then the most constricted of the levels is Ihsan, which is the highest of them. So if you notice and go in your books, it says, فَأَرْكَانُ الْإِسْلَامِ خَمْسَةٌ شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة وصوم رمضان وحج بيت الله الحرام. So he said that the arkan, the pillars of Islam, are 5. And they are al-a'mal al-zahira. They are the open actions which are professed openly. They are professed openly. Which is the testimony that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and that Muhammad is the message of Allah, and to establish the prayer, and to pay the zakat and fast the month of Ramadan, and to make that pilgrimage to the sacred house of Allah subhanahu jalla fil ula. فَدَلِيلُ الشَّهَادَةِ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى. So notice that he's starting with the arkan al-Islam bima'na al-a'mal al-zahira. He's starting with the pillars of Islam, which are 5, which are the open actions. So we're starting with Islam. So Islam is what? If he wants to purify and actualize his ubudiyah, the first step towards actualizing why you've been created and why you've been brought into this existence starts with this step here. The first step is Islam. So if one wants to become strong as a human being and purified as a human being and reach a high level amongst the human beings, rather being complete as a human being, then he has to surrender himself to Allah by actualizing the ubudiyah of Allah, which is starting with the lowest level, or if you want to say in regards to the other levels, but even though it's high, which is Islam. And he said that Islam is 5. The testimony that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. If you look in your books, everyone, it says, فَدَلِيلُ الشَّهَادَةِ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى شَهِدَ اللَّهُ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ قَائِمًا بِالْقِسْطِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. If you look in your books, it says that the evidence for the testimony, meaning the statement of Allah, as it comes in Surah Al Imran, ayat number 1. ثمانية عشر, the number which is 18, meaning the dalil, the evidence and proof for the shahada. If you notice in your books, he's coming with principles and then he's substantiating these principles with proof and evidences. And it's not merely based upon emotions and what you feel and your opinions. Notice everything that the great Imam says, start off with what he inaugurated the second principle with by saying what? Ma'rifatu deen al-Islam bil-adillah. Ma'rifatu deen al-Islam bil-adillah. So this same pattern that he had laid down as a methodology, he's now starting to actualize and practice it. So he says now the arkan al-Islam are 5. The testimony that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. What's the dalil for that? The dalil is this. If you look in your books, it says for dalilu shahada. As Allah mentions in his book, none, Allah himself testifies that none has the right to be worshipped except him. And the angels and those who possess knowledge, establishing justice, none has the right to be worshipped except him. And he is Aziz and he is Hakim. He is almighty and he is all wise. Allah Ta'ala started this ayah with him bearing witness that none has the right to be worshipped except him. So notice himself, Jalla fil Ula, was the a'zamu shahada. A'zamu shahada ala al-itlaq shahadatullah Ta'ala, which is the greatest testimony. The greatest testimony, mutlaqan, in absolute all cases, is the testimony of Allah himself, where Allah testifies himself that none has the right to be worshipped except him. There's no testimony that's greater than this testimony, that Allah Ta'ala has said that he testifies that none or nothing in this existence has the right to be worshipped, even though there are other deities in which we'll talk about inshaAllah, that there are other deities that are worshipped either along with Allah or separately, cut off from Allah, meaning wholeheartedly that has nothing to do with the worship of Allah. So you have people out there that worship idols either along with Allah or separately. But the worship of them are all batila, they are all false. As we'll discuss this momentarily inshallah. So Allah Ta'ala says, none has the right to be worshipped except him. And then after that is the malaika. Then the angels themselves testify to this conviction and this belief. As we know, the angels also, they testify that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. They testify to La ilaha illallah. And they firmly believe that. And the angels also likewise firmly believe that Allah is above the heavens. So it's not just the worship of Allah. So the malaika and the creed of the angels, in which we do not see, they believe in the rububiyyah and the uluhiyyah of Allah Ta'ala, the lordship of Allah, and they testify to his rububiyyah, his lordship, and they testify to his worship. Because we know from the malaika, rather, the malaika, all of them, obey what Allah has commanded them. And that is part of their ubudiyyah, of their worship of him, by carrying out what Allah has commanded them. And we know from them also who worship him. They for actual do, and they devote every day and night worshiping him Ta'ala. And some of them, like we said, have other functions of writing down the actions of the ibad. But the point of the matter is all of them surrender and worshiping Allah and carrying out what he commanded. And they also believe that Allah is above. They're above the heaven. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above the heavens. After the great shahada, the testimony of Allah, then the testimony of the malaika, Allah ta'ala says of those who testify to this fact and this conviction are the ulul ilm, those who possess proper knowledge. And the knowledge here is the knowledge of kitab and sunnah. Not just the knowledge, or not the knowledge of what they say secular knowledge, or the knowledge of this world, as far as in engineering, as far as in science, but rather those who have knowledge of kitab and sunnah, and those that know the signs of Allah amongst his creation. Those who truly have knowledge in this matter, they are the ones that testify to the fact that none has the right to be worshipped except one deity. who is Allah Himself. Establishing justice, as it says in the ayah, none has the right to be worshipped except Him, and He's Aziz and He's Hakeem. If you look to the book, in your books, everyone, it says, معناها لا معبود بحق إلا الله وحده فلا إله نافيا جميع ما يعبد من دون الله إلا الله مثبت العبادة لله وحده لا شريك له في عبادته كما أنه لا شريك له في ملكه. If you look in your books, everyone, it says, none has the right to be worshipped in truth except Allah. He says that the meaning of La ilaha illallah, he says the meaning of La ilaha illallah, ma'naha la ma'buda bihaq illallah wahdahu. There's nothing of a deity worthy of worship in truth except Allah. For those who say that the meaning of La ilaha illallah is La ma'bud, there's nothing worshipped except Allah alone, that is incorrect, and they did not understand La ilaha illallah properly. Because there are other deities that are worshipped, and they are called aliha. If you'll find even in the book of Allah, where the mushrikeen used to call their deities aliha, deities. And Allah Ta'ala also called them deities. Allah Ta'ala called what they were worshipped aliha, which means ma'lu, something that is worshipped. So, in reality, there are other deities, but the worship of them are batila. Ibadatuhum batila. The worship of them are invalid and rejected, and they're false. So that's the correct definition of La ilaha illallah. None has the right to be worshipped in truth except Allah, because there are other deities out there that are worshipped, either along with Allah or separately from Allah. But the worship of them, like we said, are batila. They're false. Also, likewise, you'll find that the people these days, back during the time of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and even in the book of Allah, you'll find that they call those deities aliha. Aliha, which is the plural of ilah. The singular is ilah. The plural is aliha. In these days and times, they're called mashayikh. Mashayikh al-turuq, salihin, mahabbat al-salihin. They are called also different names, but it is the same, even though they changed the name. You'll find that those, especially with the Muslims in these days and times, they're called mashayikh, mashayikh al-turuq. They're called the mystic way, when the mystics so-called mashayikh, and also so-called scholars who are submitted in their ahkam or in their tashri'at, or in their legislations, which opposes the legislation of Allah, which the people obey and which we'll discuss in a couple of minutes. But as far as in the deities that are worshipped along with Allah Ta'ala, in these days and times you'll find that the Muslims, even though they're called mashayikh al-turuq, they're still aliha. Because you'll find that the Muslims that they want do the exact same thing that the polytheists did in the past with these so-called people who are called, they are called aliha likewise, even though the Muslims do not call them that. They call them so-called mashayikh al-turuq al-sufiyya, or they call them, for example, salihin, or they call they're the righteous. In certain cases they are, but in certain cases they aren't. For verily anyone that gives a right of Allah to a human being or something created, it doesn't matter whether it's a rock or a tree or if it's a person, and the rights of Allah, which are the affairs in which we mention of supplication, and as such as raghba, wal rahba, wal isti'adha, wal istighatha, all those various types of worship that we mentioned of supplication and seeking help and tawakkul and reliance. If those rights that are only sincerely for Allah are given to a human being or a rock or a tree, they're still considered aliha, even though you might call them muslimun or mashayikh al-turuq al-sufiyya or so-called salihin, or even if they're from the talihin. If you now give a right of Allah to these people, you have taken them as an aliha. You'll find that the Muslims try to cover it up by calling them something else. Like we said, they call them these type of names, Mashayikh al-Turuq, or Mahabbat al-Salihin, or the love of the righteous. So now, as we said, just the names or the changing, or the mere changing of the names, does not change the reality of what you're doing. Just because a person comes with a bottle of intoxicants, and it says on it, at first, intoxicant, and then you tear off the name off the bottle and you put on it refreshing drink, does not change the reality that what's considered inside the bottle, it's still intoxicants. So just because you change the name does not change the reality of the affair, what it is. And that's what you'll find that the Muslims do today. They change, they say, no, we're not going to call them Aliha. Let's switch the name and call them Mashayikh. Mashayikh al-Turuq, al-Sufiya, Salihin, Mahbubin, Awliya of Allah. They use these names. Awliya, Mawla, Salihin, Mashayikh al-Turuq. They have taken them as lords besides Allah, as we'll talk about inshallah. And they've taken them as deities, even though they changed the name. The name changes, but the reality is still the same. You have taken them as deities of worship besides Allah. And this happens to a lot of Muslims all around the world. Just as some of the mushrikeen during the time of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had came with names, but still the Messenger of Allah clarified to them the true reality of what you're doing, even though you might have changed the name a bit, is still polytheism. It's still the same principle. It's still the same methodology. The same thing applies on a lot of the Muslims these days, especially those who are in the realm of a turuq al-Sufiya, of those who are upon mysticism, of what they call it. And likewise, in regards to the Muslims who are involved in politics, and some of the Muslims who even fall into following their so-called Mashayikh al-Turuq, or so-called Mashayikh al-Qaba'il. Because you'll find in certain places in the Muslim world, they have what they call Mashayikh al-Qaba'il, like the head so-called Mashayikh of their tribes. And you'll find that these Mashayikh and their tribes, they legislate ahkam and tashri'at. They legislation, or they bring about legislations, and also ahkam and rulings, which is in opposition to what Allah revealed. And you'll find that they apply them to their what? To their people in their village or in their town or in their area that they live in, of those who are so-called Mashayikh al-Qaba'il who are put in charge. If the people follow those Mashayikh in those laws and those legislations, then they have taken them likewise as arbab, as lords besides Allah. A lot of people think that what we're reading today doesn't apply on the Muslimun. Rather, it does apply on a lot of the Muslims these days. In which to let everyone know how ignorant a lot of the Muslims are of the mere fundamental principles of the religion. If they was to understand these principles, and then they apply these different types of principles based upon the waqi', the reality of what they're living, you'll find that if they was to understand it properly, they would leave off a lot of what they're practicing of polytheism in certain aspects. May Allah Ta'ala aid them and aid us all. You'll find, as it says in the book of everyone, it says, there's no ma'bud bihaq. There's no ma'bud bihaq except Allah. So we said that is the proper meaning of La ilaha illallah, meaning there's no deity worthy of worship in truth except Allah. That's the proper meaning. Why? Because al-ma'budat kathira. There's a lot of deities that are worshipped either along with Allah or separately from Allah. But the worship of them are batila. Allah Ta'ala has laid this haqq down where He says He has testified that He does not, nothing has the right to be worshipped except Him. And Allah Ta'ala mentions La ilaha. None has the right to be worshipped. You'll find in the Arabic language they call that nafiyan lil jins, meaning negating everything without any exception. None has the right to be worshipped. La ilaha. Allah did not say La ilahun. He said La ilaha. As we know in the Arabic language, for those who have knowledge of it, that from those emphasis that one wants to put, if he was to speak, that he would say, for example, La ahada fil fasl, like no one's in the class. In the Arabic language, you'll find there's a way you can say it. For example, Ma ja'a ahadun li hudud ad-dars, for example. No one came to attain, no one came. Yeah, that applies to what I'm speaking about now. No one, except for the sisters. No one came to attend the class. This statement, ma ja'a ahadun li hudud ad-dars, can be utilized in the Arabic language for a person that maybe, let's just say, one or two people came. It could be used for the context of one understanding, if they was to hear it, that no one came, or maybe just a few people came. If I was to use that type of pattern, for example, lam yati ahadun, I said ahadun ad-dars. Or for example, ma jaha ahadun li hudud ad-dars. No one came to attend the class. That type of statement can be utilized, like we said, if a person wanted to, if they said it and they were speaking Arabic, what the person that's listening will understand, either no one came or maybe just a few people came. But if I said now, la ahada ja'a lid-dars, la ahad, la ahada, that's called nafiyan lil jins. I negated everything till there's no ihtimal, where there's no exception, where there's no other way you can understand that anyone came to the lesson. And notice Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala used this type when He described the worship, where He said, La ilaha. He didn't say La ilahun or La yujad ilahun. So maybe that the person might understand, if they was to hear it, oh, there is a couple of deities that are worshipped along with Allah. No, Allah used the usloob, or the pattern in the Arabic language. This is called nafiya lil jins. Nafiya lil jins, meaning negating everything and everything in this existence. Nothing deserves to be worshipped in truth except one deity. No matter whether it's a human being, an animal, rock, tree, no matter what it is. For verily, like we said, Ya ma'ashal ikhwa, may Allah Ta'ala use this usloob, or this type of pattern in this book, in order to establish that He negates everything that deserves to be worshipped except Him, even though they might exist and they are called deities, or they might be called mashayikh at-turuq, or they might be called salihin, or they might be called musharri'un, or those who legislate. They are all considered deities, even though certain people call them different names to try to deceive the people. But the actuality, or the reality, is that they're aliha. They're still deities that the people worship along with Allah or separately from Allah. So like we said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, La ahada, La ilaha. It's similar to the statement, like I said, if I was to say to a person now, did anyone come to the lesson? I could say, Ma ja'a ahadun li hudud ad-dars, or lam yati ahad. If I said lam yati ahadun, like we said, a person hearing it will understand maybe no one came, or maybe perhaps just a few people came. But if I said la ahada ja'a, la ahada, that negates everything or everyone. So you notice the different types of what? Different types of usloob, or patterns that are utilized in the Arabic language in order to what? To put emphasis on something. And Allah Ta'ala use what they call in the Arabic language nafiyan lil jins, which now negates everything that's worshipped besides Allah Ta'ala, except what? Except Allah. Muthbitan al-ibada lillahi wahdahu la sharika lah. So we said la ilaha. La ilaha, none has the right to be worshipped. هذا فيه رد على المشركين. إلا الله فيه رد على الملاحدة والملحدين. As we talked about, that negating, when Allah Ta'ala negates everything that's worshipped along with Him, or separately. That is a refutation against the polytheists. And illallah, except Allah, is a refutation against the atheists. So Allah refutes deviant sects in just a mere testimony that none has the right to be worshipped in truth except Him. Allah Ta'ala refutes the polytheists and He refutes the atheists. He refutes all of them. Allah Ta'ala mentions La ilaha, refutation against the polytheists, of those who worships a rock, they worship Buddha, they worship a tree, they worship a human being, they worship shaitan, they worship the devil. Allah Ta'ala refutes all of those groups. Who worships Jesus, the son of Mary, who worships Uzair, who worships the horse, who worships the sun, who worships the moon, who worships the stars, who believe in zodiac signs, who try to draw close to the shayateen from the magicians. Allah refutes all of them in this one what? In this one statement. Refutes the Sahara, refutes all of them. Refutes all their claims, because all of them either are what? In actuality, all of them are worshipped of the shayateen. All of them are worships of the shayateen, who are the devils in actuality, even though they think otherwise. When you say illallah, Allah Ta'ala affirms the worship of Him alone, without any partners in His worship. Notice if you look in your books, everyone, it says, كَمَا أَنَّهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ فِي مُلْكِهِ فَلَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ فِي عِبَادَتِهِ. Just as there's no partners with Him in His dominion, in His kingdom, meaning of what He created and what He owns. As Allah Ta'ala owns everything in this existence. He's the owner of it because He created it alone. And He owns it alone. And likewise, it's applicable now. If this is the case, where He has created everything, He's the owner of everything, then He is the one that deserves likewise the ibadah of Him, or the worship of Him Ta'ala. Meaning, which is another example of what we have said 1,000 times and over in so many classes, that Allah uses Tawheed al-Rububiyyah to establish the affair of Tawheed al-Ilahiyyah or Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. And we have mentioned this about 1,000 times and over, so I hope that everyone understands that already. Because we know that Allah separately, Allah alone creating, and Allah alone is the owner of everything. That is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah infarada bil-khalq wal-rizq wal-mulk. Branching off and being singled out in His actions, such as creation, sustaining, and also ownership of everything. For Allah Ta'ala, just as He is separate, such as He is singled out alone in these affairs, which is Ar-Rububiyyah, then likewise it's obligatory that the creation unify Him in His ibadah. Notice it says in the book, if you look in your books, everyone, تفسيرها الذي يوضحها قوله تعالى وإذ قال إبراهيم لأبيه وقومه إنني براء مما تعبدون إلا الذي فطرني فإنه سيهدين وجعلها كلمة باقية في عقبه لعلهم يرجعون. The tafsir of that, in which clarifies this fact, you'll find in the ayah where Allah Ta'ala says, hence when Ibrahim said to his people, verily I am free from what you worship, except the one who created me, for verily He will guide me. The same principle that he just laid down, La ilaha illallah, is mentioned in this ayah. If you look in your books, if you look in your books of Surah Ali Imran, ayah number 64, if you look in your books, La ilaha illallah is mentioned here in this ayah. If you look, it says, hence when Ibrahim said, verily I am free from what you worship. That is La ilaha. None has the right to be worshipped in truth except the one who created me. Illallah. For verily he will what? Guide me. I'll say it again. If you look in your books. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ إِنَّنِي بَرَاءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ. Verily I free myself from what you worship. That is La ilaha. إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي فَإِنَّهُ سَيَهْدِينَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. So illallah is mentioned, La ilaha illallah is mentioned in different ways upon the tongues of the prophets and messengers. When Ibrahim said, I free myself from what you worship. That's La ilaha. Except the one who fatarani, who created me, is illallah, is mentioned in the ayah. If you notice in your books, everyone, the other ayah, Ya qul ya ahl al-kitab, ta'alaw ila kalimatin sawa'in baynana wa baynakum, an la na'buda illa Allah wa la nushrika bihi shay'a, wa la yattakhidha ba'tuna ba'tan arbaban min dunillah, fa in tawallaw faqulu shhadu bi anna muslimun. If you notice in your books, everyone, it says, O people of the book. He says, say, O people of the book, come to a word that is the same between us and you, that we do not worship, La ilaha again, illallah, illallah. That's self-explanatory. Now look in the ayat again. وَلَا نُشْرِكَ بِهِ شَيْئًا. That's again mentioned, La ilaha. ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله. That we do not take each other as lords. That's La ilaha. Besides Allah, illallah is mentioned again. I'll say it again. If you look in your books in Surah Ali Imran, if you look in your books, it says, oh, people, say to the people of the book, come to a word that is what? Equal between us and you. That you do not worship, that's La ilaha, except Allah. That's clear. وَلَا نُشْرِكَ بِهِ شَيْئًا. وَلَا نُشْرِكَ بِهِ شَيْئًا. And we do not set up partners, anything in the least. That's La ilaha. وَلَا يَتَّخِذُ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا وَلَا يَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا أَرْبَابًا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. And then we do not take each other as what? As lords besides Allah. That La ilaha illallah mentioned again. For verily they turn away, they say, testify that we are Muslimun. طيب. If you look in this ayah, ma'ashal ikhwa, as we said, that we do not worship except Allah. Then that we do not set up partners with him, anything or anyone in the least. That's pertaining to what? Those who give the rights of Allah to Allah. Notice it says in the ayah that we do not take each other as lords besides Allah. What do they mean by that? What does the ayah mean? The ayah means, Ya ma'ashal ikhwa, even in those who come with the laws of that's in an opposition, and traditions and customs, and they legislate it, because you'll find in certain Muslim countries that they come what they call a taqalid or a sawalif, a taqlidiyya, al-munahida, al-munafiya, al-mu'arida lima ja'a bihi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أو بالتشريع الذي جاء به محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. والمثال على ذلك القوانين الوضعية البشرية مثل الديمقراطية وهي نظم طاغوتية يجب الكفر بها. As you'll find, there are people who give and legislate to the people cultural practices and say that it is halal to do this. Cultural practices that oppose Islam, or customs that oppose Islam, and they'll say that it is what? This is from Islam and it is halal for you to do this. For verily, if they're so-called mashayikh, they're so-called scholars that do this and bring these type of legislations, bind them upon the people to practice, and it's in total opposition to what the Messenger of Allah brought and the religion of Islam, and the people follow them in that, they have taken them as lords besides Allah. If they know what they're doing is incorrect, and if they know what those so-called heads of their communities or their heads of their villages or what have you have come with a legislation that opposes what the Messenger of Allah came with, if they know this and they have knowledge of this and they follow them in that, they have taken them as lords besides Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And also in the realm and in the area of which you'll find in which a lot of the Muslims have embarked upon, even some people who are callers to Salafiyya that they say, who call the people to vote and call the people to be involved in the non-Muslim disbelieving politics and involve the Muslims inside of those affairs. Whereas we know that the non-Muslims and what they do in amongst themselves is coming with legislations and laws to run their land, that a lot of them are in opposition to what Allah and His Messenger have come in order for what? For the lands and the societies to be rectified. And such as the laws, as we know, as democracy, which you'll find there's certain Muslims that they indulge in. And you'll find there are certain callers out there that call the people to it. Rather, you'll find there are certain Muslims out there say it's obligatory for you to vote. And it's obligatory for you to be involved in non-Muslim politics. If you involve yourself in this affair, and like we said, if they come with these laws inside of the realm of politics, because we know that they legislate laws, they come with legislations in which they call al-qawaneen al-wad'iyya al-bashariyya, legislated man laws or man-made laws. Those man-made laws, if they're opposition to Islam, they are nudhumun taghutiyya. They are taghut. It's a taghut. Any type of system, that which is what the people used to practice before Islam, because any system that opposes what Allah and His Messenger came with is a systematic taghuti system. That's a taghut. That's obligatory upon you to disbelieve in if you want to meet Allah and your faith is intact. So, if you want to disbelieve and make your belief sound, it's obligatory upon you to disbelieve in all of these different jahili, taqaleed, or if you want to call them qawaneen or nudhum, wad'iyya, taghutiyya, jahiliya. Any system that opposes what Allah's Messenger came with, or legislation that Allah came with, is a system considered jahili taghuti. It's obligatory upon you to totally reject it, denounce it, and distance yourself from it. This is the reason why we tell the Muslims to stay away from the non-Muslim politics. Stay out of it. Distance yourself from it. Due to the fact that what's going on amongst themselves is legislations and laws and systems and protocols and all of those matters which opposes what Muhammad and what Allah and His Messenger have what? Brung. Any law that opposes that is called taghuti, jahili. All you have to do is look around you of what's going on around you. Do these laws, is it truly bringing safety and security to the lands, or do we see murder and killing and a bunch of chaos around us? You see a lot of murdering and killing around us, chaos, which lets you know that man-made laws do not work. They do not work. They work to a certain extent only because of some portion of what they came with agrees with what Allah has revealed. And it's partial. That's because some of the laws that they came with, it does agree. But they're not doing that intentionally, it's unintentionally. Even though a lot of the kuffar have stole, meaning they took a lot of their ways of how they practice from the Muslims initially. Then they mixed it up with their own opinions and their own ideas and their own perceptions and their own ways of so-called what they think is the way man is supposed to live, or human beings are supposed to live. But they stole it from the Muslims, then they mixed it up with their own concepts. But if you look into the history of a lot of different countries, before Islam came, you'll find a lot of those countries as if they were living in the most filthiest manner. A lot of the non-Muslims, you'll find that before Islam came to their country, they were disgusting. They didn't know how to take a bath. A lot of them would go months without taking a bath. A lot of them didn't even know how to use the bathroom properly. They would take pots of their poop and their pee and they would just throw it out in the window. When Islam came, it showed them how to properly run their society. The non-Muslims had took it from them, from the Muslims initially. Then they incorporated their own concepts. But at any rate, just to generalize, if you want to talk about the medieval type of history, you'll find that those who truly cleaned up the non-Muslims were the Muslims. The Muslims had street lights in certain countries. If you look to even during Spain, because Spain was ruled by the Muslims for a long period of time. All you have to do is read it. Read your history and educate. When you read yourself and educate, you will find that the non-Muslims follow behind the Muslims in their way of life. And they stole a lot of their concepts from them to how to run a society. Of how to clean, how to take a bath, how to set up a school, how to put lights and sewages in streets. All of them were stolen from the Muslims and took it from them if you read the stories and you read the history. They didn't know how to live. They were nasty, filthy people in their belief system and physically. If you look to the UK and some of even the Queen of the UK said, I didn't take a bath for a whole year. In certain things that I forgot was it Queen Elizabeth. One of them said that she said that I haven't taken a bath in probably a whole year. Physically and as far as in their conviction, nasty people. Nasty. However, it's sad to say that everything is switched now. They're not, the Muslims not even realizing that the kuffar, the reason why they have somewhat partial safety is because of what they took from the Muslims initially. But we still chaos in society. Why? Because their concepts of what they call man-made laws was laid in the land. And we know to this day, if you see what's going on around us, it's havoc and chaos. And it's a lot of contradictions. And a lot of argumentation and bickering and verbal confrontation, even amongst themselves. Because man-made laws and opinions, Allah Ta'ala knows that man, He created them with a mind. That each one and each individual are going to have their own way of how they perceive of what's good and what's bad. Or what's beneficial or what's harmful for so-called society. Allah created people with this type of way of thinking. That's the reason why you find a lot of politicians to this day are still bickering and arguing amongst themselves of what system is beneficial. Because they have no resource to return back so it can alleviate that type of differing. They don't have it. So they now just contradict each other with combating one with the other, with one man-made law, and with another man-made law, and with another man-made law. No, this is going to work. No, that doesn't work. That's not. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on and never stops. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed His favor upon us by saying, stay away from the man-made laws and being involved in them. Because eventually it's going to burn out. So stick to what Allah and His Messenger have legislated. Because these affairs are dangerous. Because if the Muslim has the i'tiqad or the belief that what man has legislated, which is opposes what Allah and His Messenger came with, and that the laws of man are more beneficial and more, it is beneficial than what Allah has legislated, and what the message of Allah came with, and that will rectify the land, that is a kufr that will nullify your Islam. It will nullify your Islam. If you believe that the qawaneen or the laws or the systems of mankind will rectify the lands, and that's what's most beneficial, and that will bring about lands, and that what Allah had legislated, that's not befitting, that's not suitable for modern day society, you have to be very careful because that belief will nullify your Islam. For example, those who changed the legislation of, for example, now let's imprison these people for all their lives. At the end of the day, you see that legislation that man came up with did not bring any benefit. Of all these people who have been incarcerated for years, hasn't brought any benefit. Rather, it makes a lot of them worse when they come out. That's why the legislation of Allah is the most perfect. You receive your punishment, that's it. You keep on moving with your life. Imprisoning someone with putting a steel ball around his leg, or put him in a cage for 70 years, or 50 years, or 70 years, or 80 years, or internal imprisonment. That is a legislation that opposes what Allah had laid down as a punishment. And you can clearly see what the results of this are. It doesn't bring any rectification to the person or to the human being. Rather, in a lot of cases, it makes them worse. That's why you'll find a lot of them, when they say when you come in prison, they tell you to your face, you'll be back. Why? Because they know they messed you up mentally. They know that. That's why a lot of them say that, you'll be back. Because we know mentally you're still messed up. Rather, probably you're mentally worse than before you came in. We messed you up even more. To let you know that the legislations of these man-made laws is nothing in the face of what Allah and His Messenger came with. It's nothing. What Allah and His Messenger have come with is perfect, and it will rectify society and rectify the human beings. One has to be very careful, because if you believe this, and you believe that what man comes with, and you believe that their legislation and their laws and their system and their protocol and their way of life is beneficial and is going to rectify society and it's better than what Allah came with, that you have taken them as lords besides Allah Ta'ala. And you follow them in that, So a lot of people think this ayah, when they say that we do not take each other as lords besides Allah, they think that's just in what happened to the Jews and the Christians as far as following their religious leaders. Because that's what the hadith says. When the tafsir Adi ibn Hatim was mentioned about what the Messenger of Allah has said, they think that's only regards to the Christians and the Jews. No, that's applicable to the Muslims who follow what's taking place and them involving themselves in non-Muslim politics. You fall into polytheism where you do not perceive. A Muslim knows if a person who truly values Tawheed of Allah, soon as he hears that something is a polytheism is involved, he wants to distance himself 1,000,000 miles away from it. If he knows that it's going to make munafa, contradicted to the Tawheed of Allah, because he knows that's the most valuable thing that he possesses is his aqeedah and his belief system, and keeping it purified and maintained before he meets Allah. And he hears that there's a risk of me falling into polytheism. If a person truly had knowledge of Tawheed, he would distance himself totally away from it. Because I'm not risking my Tawheed on something just because of something worldly. And me dying in the grave and then I'm being punished forever because I fell into something that totally was in contrast to what Allah Ta'ala has sent down. I'm not risking my hereafter for something stupid and worldly that's going to be temporary. It's not that deep for me to be involved in non-Muslim politics, like these stupid callers out here that claim that they Salafi, busying themselves with politics. Years ago, and he's supposed to be a so-called holder of a PhD, and you see that you don't even know how to properly apply the fundamentals of Islam, and you say I'm jealous of you? Shows you a PhD didn't even benefit you. You don't even know how to properly, fundamentally practice or Islam for the people and want good for the people, because you don't even know how to fundamentally practice it or lay it down, teach it to the people. You busy in the people with non-Muslim politics. Did that show that you truly benefited for 18 years of your studies? Nothing. And you can't even open the book of Usul al-Thalatha and teach it to the people and start true rectification of society. I'm not impressed. I don't care if you study 40 years in Medina. When you come back and you do not now engage in your methodology of how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave dawah, you or your dawah is going to fail. I don't care how many PhDs and degrees you hold. I have challenged and I have said this over and over again. Bring me the classes of your usul al-thalatha. Bring me your classes in Kitab al-Tawheed. Bring me your classes in Kashf al-Shubahat. Bring me your classes. Bring me your classes in establishing the fundamentals of Tawheed of Allah. Bring it. You have yet to bring anything except a bunch of jibber jabber and a bunch of nonsense saying it's personal between AbdurRazzaaq and so-and-so. It ain't have nothing to do with personal what you did to me, akhi. It's all about me loving the people and truly nourishing and getting these people out of the darkness that they're in, and you're adding to the darkness in the name of Salafiyah. That's why I'm upset. Has nothing to do with me. It has something to do with Allah and His Messenger and true Salafiyah, and wasn't good for these people. And wasn't good for these children. While we're trying to remove the darkness, you're adding to it. In the name of Salafiyah. Which is humiliating. Bring your refutations against the people bid'ah. Bring it. Bring your refutations against the Sufis. Bring your refutations against the Takfiris. Bring your refutations against the Ash'aris. Bring it, bring it, bring it, bring it, bring it. You have yet to bring it. You know why? Because you're with them. And you make excuses for them. They're not Ahlul Bid'ah. But the Salafis are. It's disgraceful how the minds of the people have become so small and just focusing on academia all the time. And they give precedence to that over just merely looking at that's a no-brainer for a Muslim that studies Usul al-Thalatha probably for 3 months could realize that the correct call is to start with the Tawheed of Allah and teaching these people about the knowledge of Allah. That's true rectification. And I'm not talking about you teaching it in the Haram in Medina. I'm talking about you teaching to these people here in America who's in darkness. So don't try to say, I taught Kitab al-Tawheed when I was in the Haram in Medina. No. I'm talking to these people here, in the trenches, in the belly of Shaitan, here. We're not talking about teaching Kitab al-Tawheed in Medina. Alhamdulillah, the land of Tawheed, Saudi Arabia, are free from the likes of you. They have enough efforts that they put in to cleanse their land of shirk. We're talking about the belly of Shaitan here. Cleanse shirk and polytheism from the belly of Shaitan here. So like I said, I'm not impressed in regards to what? Those callers who ascribe themselves to Salafiyah, even though they do not even know how to fundamentally bring people out of the darkness. It's nothing personal, Yahi. This is the religion. It has nothing to do with me and you personally. At all. This is how it makes me sad because I see the darkness that the people are falling into. And we want to remove this darkness. And we want good for the people. But however, like we said, it's sad to say that it's so deceiving and deceptive. That there are people who actually ascribe themselves to this minhaj, this blessed methodology, and at the same time, they are clearly opposing it. That is very satanic and evil. So I say again, if you look in the Usul al-Thalatha, and we'll stop here, where Allah Ta'ala says in His book, that we do not take ourselves as lords besides Allah. Meaning stay away from the non-Muslim politics. Stay away from it. If you know that there's a risk of my tawheed being lost, then I would distance myself from anything that would risk of something that would be detrimental to my belief system, even though I know that's the most sacred thing I carry within myself, which is what I believe. And I do not want to risk it being what? Being tainted. Because we know Allah Ta'ala has clearly said in His book, on the day that one's wealth and his children will not avail him except the one who comes to Allah with a sound heart, meaning with a sound conviction, a sound belief. The most sacred thing that any human being carries in himself is his conviction, his belief. And he does not want to risk anything that what? Will taint it. So that's the last principle we'll stop at for this week. Then we'll continue next class. Bi-idnillah jalla wa azz. We'll stop here. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Any questions about the lesson?